Welcome to ParadoxWalk podcast, specializing in paranormal activity, UFOs, cryptids, unexplainable events, supernatural happenings, anything completely out of the ordinary. It is close to November of the year 2022. This is episode 16. Today we're going to be going over the Freemasons' total obsession with King Solomon of Israel, and a couple glitch things. Some people being able to not even necessarily like predict, but just get songs in their head that are going to be on the radio, and then they turn on the radio and then they're there. I have one report of a guy that started singing a song, and then when his wife turned on the radio, the song was at the part that was next after the lyrics that he sang. Pretty bizarre. Chances of that are beyond the trillions, I would imagine. At some points when I do my vocal editing in some of these parts, my voice is going to sound really, really different. It's because I was at a hockey game the night before, and our team won, and it was a really intense game, and we were all yelling the whole time. I also have a Masonic Bible, not because I'm a Mason, but because I found it at a thrift shop. It's so weird that the first 200 pages of this, if you go into the Bible, it's just a regular King James, but they preface this Bible as a Masonic thing with about 200 pages or so of just sweating King Solomon this, King Solomon that, Hiram Abiff this, and we should do our works this way, and it's all about works, working your way to be like King Solomon and stuff like that. The point that the Christians bring up is that Jesus was supposed to be the ultimate sacrifice, so why would they be doing this? Since nothing like that needs to be done anymore for spiritual growth or whatever. I don't know much about the Freemasons, but from what I've heard, I guess they have blue lodges and red lodges, kind of like there's York Rite and Scottish Rite. I'm not going to pretend like I know the difference between all that stuff, but from what I've heard, the blue lodges are in charge of laws and space, making rules and taking charge of laws and rules and areas and physical stuff, and the red lodges are supposedly about working with blood and time. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe if somebody knows more about that than I do, they can comment. But when you open anything with Freemasonry, I'll just open any page. I just opened a random page here, and it says King Solomon's Temple and Citadel, and the complete series of illustrations. They show the plan of King Solomon's Temple, the side elevation of the temple, the northeast corner of the temple, the banquet scene of King Solomon's palace. The code that the Masons use is called a pigpen cipher, because I stopped at one of these. It wasn't a parade, but it was kind of like this little celebration outside one of the Masonic temples, and I saw this wooden chest, and it had all this code on it. One of my other friends said it looked like Braille, but eventually I figured it out that it's a pigpen cipher, and you can decipher it, and all of their things is about King Solomon, Hiram Abiff, or the King of Tyre. And I haven't heard anything positive about the King of Tyre. If you look at what he's supposed to represent, it's not very good. So that same friend that was we're kind of working through that pigpen cipher and this code and stuff, sent me a link to the audiobook of extra biblical stories of King Solomon, and I'm going to get into that today. Come to find out, if you get into these other stories of King Solomon, it's not that he was wise, that they wanted, that these Freemasons want to follow him or be like him. It's because he was the grand ultimate magician. He was the ruler of the complete world. He had control over animals, the winds, demons. He could control demons in some of these stories. He used demons to build the temple. If he had all these abilities, why would he need help to build the temple in the first place? King Solomon gets outsmarted in a few different ways in these stories. To point this out, I'm going to start reading at the marriage of Solomon. This is about him marrying an Egyptian princess. But anyway, so he wanted to marry her. He waited till his teacher died, which is weird. So when his teacher died, Solomon took her to wife. I'm going to skip a lot around here, and that says Solomon's wedding feast is a larger celebration than the completion of the temple. And then on the nuptial night, what happens with this princess is that she was trying to promote her Egyptian gods there. The pharaoh's daughter, which is the princess, the Egyptian princess, had her attendants play upon 1,000 different musical instruments, which she had brought with her from her home. And as each one was used, the name of the idol, the false god to which it was dedicated, was mentioned aloud. And then it says this: the better to hold the king under the spell of her charms. She spread above his bed a tapestry cover studded with diamonds and pearls which gleamed and glittered like the constellations in the sky. Whenever Solomon wanted to rise, he saw these stars, and thinking it was night still, he slept on until the 4th hour of the morning. Now, to me, that sounds like just a total like magical spell to put somebody, like, sounds like she put him like in a coma, like she wanted to take over the whole. I mean, if he's like the ruler of the whole world, that makes the queen like she was the ruler of the whole world as long as that guy slept, right? Well, a couple things happened after that, so I'm going to keep reading. The people were plunged into grief, for the daily sacrifice could not be brought on this very morning of the temple dedication, because the temple keys lay under Solomon's pillow. So none dared awaken him. So they went and got his mom. His mom had to come and wake him up. She was the only one that could like break the spell or whatever. One of the things is mentioned in here that I looked up and I couldn't find anything was that it is mentioned that he had the knowledge of the 49 gates of wisdom that were open to Solomon as they had been to Moses. There's a lot of things about Moses that no one ever really talks about. Like, he could do a lot of the magical stuff from Egypt. He was raised in Egypt, and he was gone to the school, like all those like weird Egyptian mystery schools and magic schools and stuff. And the part where he throws down his staff and it turns into a snake. But Solomon could like do all these illusions and stuff too, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I looked up the 49 Gates of Wisdom, and all I found was like these silly songs made out of it. And so they like some witchcraft stuff from like John Dee and what's the other guy? The weird one that called himself the Beast. I forgot what his name was. But it's like, the other thing is, it says is that famous part in the Bible where the two women quarreled over the same child. It says that the two women in this story were not women at all, but spirits, to show Solomon's wisdom, to make that known throughout the land. I'll read on here. During the lifetime of David, when Solomon was still a lad, he had settled another difficult case in a brilliant way. A wealthy man sent his son on a business trip to Africa. On his return, he found that his father had died in the meantime, and the treasures had passed into the possession of a crafty slave who had succeeded in ridding himself of all the other slaves or intimidating them. In vain, the rightful heir urged his claim before the King David, but as he could not bring any witnesses to testify for him, there was no way of dispossessing the slave, who likewise called himself the son of the deceased. The child Solomon heard the case and had devised a method of arriving at the truth. He had the father's corpse exhumed, and he dyed one of the bones with the blood, first of one, then the other. The blood of the slave showed no affinity to the bone, while the blood of the true heir permeated it. So the real son secured his inheritance. Did anybody out there know that blood from your actual heirs will permeate your bones? I didn't know that. Is that a thing? This one is weird. This is a quote. After his ascension to the throne, a quarrel among heirs was brought before Solomon's adjudication. Asmodeus, the king of demons, once said to Solomon, "Thou art the wisest of men, yet I shall show thee something thou hast never seen." Thereupon Asmodeus stuck his finger in the ground, and up came a double-headed man. He was one of the Canaanites, who live underground and are altogether different in nature and habit from the denizens? What's a denizen? Altogether different in nature and habit from, I guess, people that live around here, the upper world. There's also a part here that the ladies won't like. So, quote, "One man among 1,000 I have found, but a virtuous woman among all of these I have not found." Solomon pledged himself to prove that he was right. He had his attendants seek out a married couple, enjoying a reputation for uprightness and virtue. The husband was cited before him. Solomon told him that he had decided to appoint him an exalted office. The king demanded only, as earnest of his loyalty, that he murder his wife, so that he might be free to marry the king's daughter, a spouse comporting with the dignity of his new station. With a heavy heart, the man went home. His despair grew at the sight of his fair wife and his little children. Though determined to do the king's bidding, he lacked the courage to kill his wife while she was awake, so he waited until she was tight asleep. But then he saw his child in his mother's arms, and rekindled his parental and conjugal affection, and he replaced the sword in his sheath, saying to himself, "Even if the king were to offer me his whole realm, I could not murder my wife." So he told Solomon his final decision. A month later, Solomon sent for the wife and declared his love for her. He told her that their happiness could be consummated, but she would have to do away with her husband. Then she would be made first wife in his harem. Solomon gave her a leaden sword which glittered as though fashioned of steel. The woman returned home, resolved to put the sword to its appointed use. Not a quiver of her eyelids betrayed her sinister purpose. On the contrary, by caressness and tender words, she sought to disarm any suspicion. In the night, she arose, drew forth the sword, and proceeded to kill her husband. The leaden instrument naturally did no harm, except to awaken her husband, to whom she had confessed her evil intent. The next day, both man and wife were summoned before the king, who thus convinced his counselors of the truth of his conviction that no dependence can be placed on a woman. The other thing I was thinking of is like it was a blunted sword. Like it would do no harm, but when you looked at it or something or felt it, it felt like it was sharp or something. That's the only way I could think that this would be pulled off. If this is real, I mean, I'm not saying any of this is like really happened. I have no idea. I'm just reading it. These are part of the magical things he could do. There also was some of the people that he had working for him. When they were done with their service, sometimes Solomon would offer them either money or wisdom. He teaches a man to learn the language of the animals. But the weird thing is that this is Solomon's quote after he gave him this knowledge. He said that there's a great danger connected with such knowledge. If thou tellest others a word of what thou hearest from an animal, thou wilt surely suffer death. Thy destruction is inevitable. Is that weird or what? Like, why is that a thing? So this guy had animals like a farmer or something? I don't know. So he learned the secret art, and he heard all these things his animals were saying. Like, it's just... Okay, so, quote, he returned home, he overheard a conversation between the ox and the ass. The ass said, Brother, how farest thou with these people? The ox, As thou livest, brother, I pass day and night in hard and painful toil. The ass, I can give thee relief, brother, if thou follow my advice. Thou livest in comfort. Rid yourself of all the hard work. The ox, oh, brother, may thy heart be... It's just ridiculous, is it not? Be inclined toward me and take pity on me and help me. I promise not to depart from thy advice, nor the right nor the left. The ass, God knows I am speaking thee the uprightness of my heart and the purity of my thoughts. My advice to thee is not to eat either straw or fodder this night. When our master notices it, he will suppose that thou art sick. He will put no burdensome work upon thee, and thou can take a good rest. That is what I did today. And the ox followed the advice of his companion. He touched none of the food. The master, suspecting a ruse on the part of the ass, arose during the night, went to the stable, and watched the ass eat his fill from the manger belonging to the ox. He could not help laughing out loud, which greatly amassed his wife, who of course had noticed nothing out of the way. The master evaded her questions. Something ludicrous had just occurred to him, he said by the way of explanation. So he keeps hearing all these things, and it starts cracking him up all the time. And then his wife wants to know why he keeps laughing, because it is ridiculous. It's just, it goes on and on like that. And something ended up happening where I think the dog kind of saved his life or something in a weird way. Solomon commanded every type of animal, and he could go send out his commands to them all. Like he used an eagle or some giant bird to go either send messages or to call forth all the animals to do his bidding for him. Queen of Sheba.
At some point in the story, Solomon asks some kind of bird or something if there's anybody around that he doesn't have rule over. The bird comes back telling him that there's this Queen of Sheba in this faraway land. He sends a letter to her using this bird, and the letter is super threatening. It's really kind of awful, if you get a message like that. The first thing the queen does is ask her advisors, who is this guy? And they don't know. Later, I had an issue with that because later on, she quizzes him. I guess that was one of the things that people did with King Solomon is they like to give him riddles and stuff like that, for fun. So when they meet up, she starts asking him riddles and stuff, and he figures them out. He has an answer for everything, but all of these riddles are about Jewish history. How could she... It seemed like her whole study was about Jewish history, but she didn't know the son of David. To me, that just seems... It seems like somebody's making that part up at least, if not... like I said before, I'm not vouching for this story. I don't know if any of this is true or not, but it's just highly suspect when nobody has any idea who this guy is, but at the same time, they know his family tree, his entire history. They knew all of the Jewish stories.